welcome to Caliper's first webinar on how to help first-time managers realize their potential. This is the first of several free webinars Caliper is going to be hosting for our clients. Our next webinar on succession planning will be conducted later this summer. We hope that these webinars provide you with further insights on how you can enhance your organization. With me today is my colleague Eileen Krantz, who is Vice President of Organizational Development Services at Caliper. Eileen has a great deal of knowledge and experience with this topic, and she's going to be discussing some of the issues involved with first-time managers and some solutions to help set up new managers for success. Thank you for joining us, Eileen.
Thank you for having me, Patrick.
Terrific, terrific. Well, in addition, we're going to be speaking with Amy Addison, who's the Internal Sales Director at John Hancock. Amy has worked at John Hancock since 2001 and has seen her department undergo tremendous employee growth. Among other things, Amy is going to share with us two very interesting and very different stories about how two of her team members were promoted to management positions for the first time, how they eventually rose to the occasion. Also with us is going to be John Carlson, the President and CEO of Bridgeton Hospital in Bridgeton, Maine. John is going to share with us his experiences with promoting managers from within, including success stories as well as some of the challenges he encountered with a few of his new managers. Now I'd like to briefly go over with you what we're going to be discussing in today's webinar. Some of the questions we'll address are, why is the hiring of first-time managers such an important issue? What types of challenges do first-time managers encounter? And how can you ensure the success of your first-time managers? So let's dive in. Now, Eileen, there are all kinds of books and articles on what it takes to be a strong manager, yet someone who's promoted to a management position for the first time, somebody like that, it can be a very tricky proposition.
Yes, it can. What we notice and to see here is that most people who are in a managerial position really haven't had much managerial or supervisory experience or training before they move into these roles. In fact, about half of the employees who move up into supervisory or management positions came from other roles inside the firm. Now, organizations do this for lots of positive reasons. They want to motivate people. They want to provide a succession plan inside their organization. So it's certainly a good thing to provide opportunity for growth inside the organization. But it also represents some of the challenges and an understanding for why first-time managers sometimes make mistakes, why they can sometimes fail, even though we have the best of intentions. We've got to remember that supervising others is a new responsibility. It's a major challenge. It's a shift in thinking. And we put people without experience in leadership roles for the first time, they can really feel overwhelmed.
You know, as I'm hearing you talk about this, Eileen, I can't help but think that companies have become much flatter, particularly over the past decade or so. So moving into a leadership role is really no longer the gradual process that it might have been before.
That's true. When you see organizations becoming leaner and flatter and less hierarchical, we don't really have a gradual growth into these leadership responsibilities. And promotions become big jumps, and they really are an additional. It's not just an additional set of responsibilities. It's not adding new stuff to the pile. It's actually a shift from doing one kind of job to doing another kind of job. I know that some companies try to have working managers, and some can make that transition okay. But usually what happens is it's very, very hard to both manage the people who are doing the job while you're also doing the job yourself. And over the long haul, that's really not as feasible as we'd like it to be. And so at some point, the manager and the organization has to decide that managing is a job in and of itself. And when you try to mix it with the individual contributor part of the role, you wind up setting up that person for failure rather than success, because it's not just that they have too much on their plate, it's that the two sets of responsibilities they have are so different that it's hard to really do them both well at the same time.
Well, I hear what you're saying, Eileen, but I'm also thinking that's a very difficult balance. I mean, because if someone's promoted to a new management position, it's generally because he or she was doing an excellent job as an individual contributor.
Yes, that's true. A lot of organizations want to reward good performance by promoting people into managerial positions. And for some people, that's the right path, but for others, it really isn't, because just because somebody was good at doing the job themselves doesn't mean that they will be as good at helping others to be effective at that job, or directing others, or developing others. And those are different behaviors and different skills. That knowledge of the previous job is helpful, but it's not the only thing that makes someone successful in a managerial role.
Very interesting, Eileen, very interesting. Let's turn now to an executive who can share with us some insights into his experience with first-time managers. John Carlson, the president and CEO of Bridgeton Hospital, had an experience where he actually pursued and convinced a talented individual to take on a role as a manager because John perceived real leadership potential in this one young man. That potential didn't pan out. That had to have been a tough learning experience for you, John.
He was very reluctant about moving up, and ultimately he failed miserably.
That's so interesting, John. Now, you thought, however, that he had it. You saw something in him, but it was something that maybe he didn't see?
Yeah. I think the best managers that I have found that have been promoted from within have had some level of confidence that they can do it. The ones that hurt the most are the ones that I encouraged to take the job. They told me they couldn't do it, but I felt they could. They didn't make it.
Yeah, I can hear that. Now, what sort of qualities do you usually look for in a manager?
The most important for me is the person is a people person, someone with good social skills who get along with other people. Ours is a service industry, and it's important for people to get along with others, to be team players, and so forth. Some of these qualities, of course, I can't teach people, and so if they have them, that's the big plus, and I'm convinced that they can make it if they have them.
Do I hear you saying, John, that it might be like a lack of confidence as being one of the main problems that you run into with new managers?
Well, that's one group of managers that that separate themselves from others. I will say that the people who exhibit a lot of confidence sometimes are not the best managers at the outset. I like to categorize some of them as having now a license to kill. They start throwing their weight around, and yet I can find it. I find it a little bit easier to work with them if they have the confidence, because I can usually bring them back to the straight and narrow by reminding them that the reason that they were selected in the first place is that the people, that the team players, and so where it takes a little bit more time for me, a little more hand-holding and educating, it's usually successful.
So you find it easier to pull them back in off the ledge rather than to try to push somebody. That's interesting. What sort of responsibilities do your managers have, John?
Well, Bridgeton is a small hospital, and so all of our managers are working managers. Their duties vary depending upon the department they're in, and also their management style varies by department. And I can give you some examples of that, understanding that my philosophy is to let my managers manage. I've got a couple of managers here at Bridgeton right now that are on opposite ends of the scale. One is a very strict manager who is very firm in terms of the times that people come and go, when they take the breaks, and so forth. And the other people really love her. I'm not sure I could work for her, but she achieves great productivity and with very, very high standards. She gets the job done and does it well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
On the other end of the scale would be a nurse manager that we have in our clinics who deals with very unpredictable levels of patient visits. But more than that, her patients are extremely sick usually, and it's a very stressful environment. So she has to deal with her staff a little bit differently. And in order to do that, she's much more flexible in terms of her hours of work. She gives them breaks when they need them, as opposed to by the clock. And it's dictated by the needs of the patient and the mission of the department. Now, this might be perceived as very relaxed management approach. But the productivity of the department is extremely high. Patients love her, staff loves her, and she does a terrific job. And letting these two managers manage differently gives our HR department fits, but achieves the best outcome.
Thanks for sharing those, Tom, because those are two good stories, and what they show is that you have very high standards in terms of performance, but you're flexible in terms of the style, so long as the managers have the respect of the workers that are overseeing. Thank you. Now, Eileen, I'd like to get back to when you talked about how the capabilities of an individual contributor don't always translate into a management role. John was just telling us that he had some great workers who ended up not making it as managers. So what I'm gathering based on what we've talked about so far is that organizations really have to be more prepared when it comes to promoting individuals.
Absolutely, and it really has a lot to do with communicating your expectations to the people who are moving into those management roles. Oftentimes we'll assume that just because somebody was wonderful in their individual contributor role, that they'll be just as good when they move into the managerial role, without having to restate or reaffirm how those expectations differ, not only in terms of what the outcomes are, but the behavior is that we expect, what's the culture of our organization, and how we expect this person to conduct themselves and what their responsibilities are. So it's really, I think, important to remember that just because they've changed chairs inside the same organization doesn't mean that you get to slack off on what you would do with onboarding a new employee in a new role, which is to reestablish what the expectations are, both production-wise and behaviorally, and to gain that person's commitment and to set them on a path to success by having them really understand how their new expectations and their new role differ from their previous role.
That's really well put, Eileen. And somehow I keep coming back to the notion that people don't always make the connection between what it took for them to succeed at what they were doing right now as an individual contributor and how different it's going to be to manage others and to manage projects. Still, a lot of people set their sights on being the manager. I mean, that's like a feather in their cap.
Right. Well, we talk about it. It's a good example from what John is talking about. The different people will approach it differently, and that what we'll sometimes see is people will assume it's because they've been made manager that somehow comes with it some crown, and that they have now been anointed and they can move forward and they can manage. And what they have to think about is how their new role is different from their previous role. How it is about getting results through others, not just achieving them themselves. And just because you were good at something doesn't mean that if everybody does it the same way you did it and you just push them to do it your way, that it will work, because different people have different styles and different needs, and it's the job of the manager to make those assessments and assist the people that work with and for them to be the best at their job in the best way they can.